The character of the mad scientist is particularly prevalent throughout modern fiction, a caricature of a professor frequently described as insane from particularly taboo or overly ambitious research. The character type first started appearing in the early 1800s, with the title character from Mary Shelley's Frankenstein being potentially the earliest example. Our list today is about real-life Frankensteins, scientists of all fields with particularly unhinged goals or practices. While it's easy to write off a caricature as just being a caricature, there have been many examples of mad scientists in more recent years, from brains kept alive outside the body to a real-life cyborg. You're watching Top Trending, and today we're counting down our picks for real-life mad scientists that went way too far. At number 5, we have Robert White, an American brain surgeon and someone whose work could be considered some of the most stomach-churning on this list. When you hear someone specializes in neurosurgery on a list entitled Scientists That Went Too Far, you can definitely expect to hear the details of some gross experiments. White was the first person to successfully remove the brain of a dog and keep it alive outside of the dog's body, and furthermore graft the vascular system onto other dogs. Serious mad scientist territory. He proved using technology that monitored brain activity that he could keep high levels of activity, and managed to keep the animals alive for 2 days. If that's not strange or messed up enough for your tastes, White succeeded in transplanting one monkey's head onto the body of another monkey. Seriously, he didn't attempt to connect the two monkey parts' nervous systems, and so had to keep the subject monkey's body alive through mechanical ventilation and drugs to stimulate the heart. What's even more creepy is this experiment was a success, with the monkeys being able to chew and swallow food and track moving objects. The animals, of course, died up to 3 days after the surgery, usually from blood clots forming from the grafting of the blood vessels. But for a limited time at least, his experiment certainly was successful. To him, animal rights activists considered the entire practice barbaric. Not that they were wrong. The process of killing animals via grotesque surgery is definitely something most would consider highly unethical. The backlash White received over his mad experiments was huge, with protesters interrupting a banquet in his honor by offering him a bloody human head replica, and with White being compared to Dr. Frankenstein during a civil hearing. Though we can certainly see why someone might evoke that comparison, Robert White isn't the most Frankenstein-esque scientist on this list. In our number 4 spot, we've put Jose Manuel Rodriguez Delgado, a professor of physiology at Yale, whose work carries implications both fascinating and terrifying. Delgado's work was focused around the power of mind control. It's oversimplifying his work, but it's essentially what he did. His work revolved around the use of a tiny device he invented called the stymosiever, created in 1963, a radio which connected a brainwave stimulator with a receiver. This device was an improvement from his earlier equipment, which would lead to visual disturbances and infection in many subjects. The stymosiever essentially could be used to control the thoughts and actions of the subject it was implanted in through radio waves. At first, Delgado found that he could control the emotions of subjects using the receiver, but later found out that if the stymosiever was used to stimulate the motor cortex, it could elicit specific physical reactions from subjects. Real-life mind control, used to move limbs or control appetites. Potentially the most well-known use of the stymosiever occurred at a bull breeding branch, when Delgado joined the bull in the ring. The bull, unsurprisingly, with a stymosiever in its brain. With the press of one button, the bull stopped its charge. The research is fascinating in a really morbid sort of way, and most would definitely consider it highly unethical, with comments on reports of Delgado's work calling him a sadistic psychopath and telling him to rot in hell. Make no mistake, creating mind control devices definitely pushes Delgado into mad scientist territory, and it's unnerving to think that technology most of us have only considered within the realms of science fiction existed decades ago. Delgado could still be alive and controlling all of us with stymosievers. After all, how do we know he isn't? Our mad scientist in our number 3 spot is Kevin Warwick. A lot of people have expressed interest in just how cool it would be for humanity to bridge the gap between man and machine, being able to use robotic technology to enhance ourselves, even earning the title of cyborgs. Kevin Warwick is nicknamed Captain Cyborg, for reasons you can probably guess. They're already here. Though Project Cyborg definitely sounds like an 80s sci-fi film in the vein of Star Kid, it's the name of a set of experiments that Warwick, a British engineer and deputy vice-chancellor of research at Coventry University, carried out from 1998. The first stage of these experiments involved a transmitter being placed beneath his skin, used to control doors, lights, heaters, and other technology around his proximity. We know what you're thinking. It's probably not worth the hassle of making yourself a cyborg if you're going to use it to turn lights off, right? This stage of the experiments had a purpose, though, to test the limits of what Warwick's body would accept. He didn't stop here. The second stage of these experiments was more complex, involving creating a neural interface developed specifically for this experiment by Dr. Marc Gasson that was implanted in 2002, interfacing directly with Warwick's nervous system. The signal produced by Warwick was detailed enough that a robot arm developed by one of Warwick's colleagues was able to mimic the actions of Warwick's own arm, without his arm being directly connected to it. That's right, you can say the statement Captain Cyborg can control his own robot arm to refer to a real-life person, and the statement would be true. Past Phase 2, additional experiments were carried out with an attempt to create a form of telepathy between two subjects via the internet, the arm of Warwick's wife being implanted with an implant similar to Captain Cyborg himself. This was a success, resulting in the first purely electronic community between two people's nervous systems. Incredible as it may sound, there has been a lot of debate about just how far we should be going with this kind of technology. Warwick offered to implant a tracking device into an 11-year-old as a method of preventing abduction, which was met with ethical concerns from children's charities, understandably. This kind of technology does have the power to do incredible things in advancing the human race, but certain kinds of technology may prove dangerous, especially if the environment in which the technology exists promotes these kind of dangers. Take recent privacy concerns about Facebook, which is a more primitive example of this kind of technology being used in a negative way. The real takeaway from this, though, is that Project Cyborg sounds like a film I'd watch in an instant. You might not be surprised to find out that cats have better eyesight than humans. That's just a given. So the mad scientist's take on this situation would be to attempt to see through the eyes of the animal. In 1999, a team of US scientists wired up a computer to a cat's brain to take images of what the cat was seeing. Sounds incredibly ambitious and to some extent impossible, but the task was carried out by recording the electrical activity of nerve cells in a region of the brain that receives signals from the eyes. From there, the team used a quote linear decoding technique to translate the signals from the cells into images of shapes. Dr. Yang Dan and her team of scientists conducted 11 separate experiments to see whether they could recognize things such as woodland scenes and faces. The images weren't particularly high quality, with the scenes being replicated with a blurred and pixelated quality to them. The explanation for this is the signals received by the region of the brain, the thalamus, undergo image processing in the higher regions of the brain. This is to help improve the quality and make the returned image more clear, and as is true in our brains as it is in the cat's. The image quality can be improved by sampling more cells though. And should this technology develop much further in the future, it's not completely impossible that recording the sight of a person will be impossible, potentially leading to a situation straight out of a Black Mirror episode. Seriously, the episode is called The Entire History of You. Unsettling stuff. And finally, at our number 1 spot, we have Robert E. Cornish. At the start of this video, we mentioned that Frankenstein was the example of the archetypal mad scientist, the one who sparked the character type in the first place through his own insistence of crossing boundaries that no man should cross. There doesn't get anything closer to a mad scientist trying to reanimate the dead than Cornish. He graduated from the University of California with honors at the age of 22, and just 7 years later became interested in the ability to revive the dead. That's right, a real-life Victor Frankenstein. His impact on the field has been felt on films such as The Lazarus Effect and Life Returns, the second of which he actually acted in. At the age of 30, Cornish began experimenting with a seesaw used to get blood flowing back into his recently deceased subjects. He initially tried to restore life to the victim of a heart attack to no avail, but in the following years, Cornish attempted to revive 2 dogs, both named Lazarus, by using the seesaw method to circulate their blood with a mixture of adrenaline and blood thinners. Here's the really freaky part. His experiments, as science fiction-y as they might seem, were actually successful. One newspaper clipping from the time said, quote, "Dr. Cornish has been reported as saying that Lazarus V returned nearer normalcy in 4 days. This is following a passage in the same article stating Lazarus IV has learned to crawl, bark, and sit up on its haunches, though the dog is blind and cannot stand alone." Encouraged by the results he received, Cornish pushed to attempt the process on humans. A death row inmate, Thomas McMonigal, actually contacted the scientist, offering his body for revival after his execution. A petition was drawn up, but was also rejected by California law enforcement. Their reason for the rejection? The Double Jeopardy Clause. Basically a clause of the Fifth Amendment stating that nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb. This is a protection given to citizens of the United States, meaning they're not allowed to serve 2 punishments for the same crime. That is, they can't be retried after an acquittal or a conviction, and can't be given multiple punishments for just one crime. Law enforcement believe that a reanimated murderer would have to be set free, as the death penalty would have already been carried out. Cornish never successfully managed to carry out the revival of a dead human, which is likely a good thing. If he had, we might have zombies walking around today. Have any suggestions for things we missed over the course of the video? Let us know in the comments section. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like, share with friends, and subscribe to Top Trending for more regular countdown videos such as this one.